Fearless and truthful.
Provocative and controversial.
We say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. It was announced this week that male cheerleaders will feature at this weekend's Super Bowl in the US for the first time. Napoleon Ginnies and Quinton Perron will make history performing alongside their female colleagues in the LA Rams squad. Never one to miss out on an opportunity to get involved, Phil's been working hard on his audition tape all morning. Take a look. You can move, Phil.
Whoa!
That is smooth.
Are you all right?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right.
I'm pleased to say no former squaddies were injured making that film.
He used to carry a gun. Just think about it.
You wouldn't like it, would you?
I tell ya, Mr. Phil Campion coming soon to a sports event near you. Anyway, coming up today, Trevor wants MPs to get on with it. Phil thinks we need to protect our shores. Afua says we need drastic action for renters. And I want top marks for our kids. But first, it's Nick.
June, thank you. A question for you. How important is or was your dad to you as you grew up? What might you have learnt from him? The reason I'm asking is after some truly depressing statistics were published by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons that showed more than half of boys held in young offender institutions are BME, black or minority ethnic. Now, to give that context, using data from the 2011 census, the BMA percentage of the population is just 14%. And while we're on the subject of figures, listen to these from the Runnymede Trust. 59% of black Caribbean children grow up in lone parent households. 9 in 10 of those families are headed by a woman. And African Caribbean fathers are twice as likely as white dads to live apart from their children. Now, I owe my dad more than words can ever express, which, coming from a journalist, is a bit ironic. Not for a moment knocking the mums, but perhaps, what chance for these young BME lads if they've not got a strong dad in their lives?
I'm not 100% against what you're saying, Nick. I mean, like you, I had a strong and rather significant father. But actually, I only lived in my parents' home as a child for about 4 years because I was in the Caribbean, they were here. Would it have been different for me if my father had been where I was? I don't know. I think, though, I think there is something in what you say. I think we need to be a bit careful here, though. Those BAME figures, and by the way, the term BAME is a thing I hate because it obscures truth rather than helps us understand it. And in that 14%, there are all sorts of people. Yes. It includes people of Indian heritage. Yep. In truth, the groups that you're talking about here are black, Afro-Caribbean, and some African groups, and also Muslims, particularly Pakistani Muslims. And the issue I put to you here is the first group, what you say about being fatherless or father-like families is probably true, but the second group, Pakistani Muslims, it is spectacularly not true. So I think simply tracing this to that cause probably isn't quite enough to get us to the place where we are.
June, am I being too simplistic?
Yes. Just a couple of things. I think, without getting into the stats, I think the statistics are slightly misleading in the sense that those statistics are for England and Wales, and when you look at the national picture, it's actually 20%, not 51%.
Right. Still quite high.
No, it's still...
No.
It's still quite high, but I think really the real problem here is poverty in general. If you look at what happens when young... Let me
But you
finish.
have white lads who are poor, do you?
Yes, you do. And if you look at around other parts of the country where you do not have large BME populations, it's white working class boys that are in young offenders institutions. And what I'm saying is, I think that there are a number of reasons. Of course, you have all of the issues relating to poverty. Then that's exacerbated when you add in race. But I think what we also have to look at, and I think it is back to your point, Trev, I do think we as a community do have to start having tough conversations amongst ourselves within...
Do you mean the black community?
Yeah,
right.
Tough
Tell me what those
conversations amongst
conversations would be.
ourselves in relation to this issue, because I find it quite interesting in the sense that, you know, have I ever told you I grew up on the council estate?
Only once or 15
just once or
times,
twice.
yeah.
And I know a
You
lot
were
of...
lucky.
I was lucky. And I know a lot of boys who decided to take the wrong path, and some who ended up in young offenders institutions and then subsequently in prison. And when you look at what happened to the ones that didn't go down that path, the ones that were kind of on the crossroads, there was always an adult that intervened at some point. There was always an adult that said, no, we are not going to allow that child to be wasted.
What sort of adult? A cop?
Whether that be a
teacher?
parent, whether that be a family member, a teacher, a community leader. And I do think that this is something that we now need to get organised on and say, not on our watch. Our parents did not come here and struggle the way they did for us to be losing
That's
so
very
many of our
interesting.
boys to the system.
I want to come back to that, but
The point that you picked up on at the very beginning of this, role models, is extremely, extremely important. When I was a kid, I did come off the rails quite considerably, you know, to the point that I was locked up at some stage. I spent a lot of time, and it wasn't until I actually started turning myself around, so you've got to dig deep yourself, but I met a guy called Griff Watkins, who was a commander in the Navy, and he gave me a chance through the YTS to become a skiing instructor. And that's what really set me on the road to actually thinking, yeah, I can achieve something here. Because up until that point, I'd been in children's homes where I didn't necessarily respect authority. And when I didn't respect authority, I turned to my peers for my respect, and my peers were all doing wrong. So I just joined in with them. And I think, you know, it's very important that we get something into these young people at an age where they can actually start looking up, achieving, and being rewarded for their achievements.
just briefly, I'll go to Afua. You're a bloke, I'm a bloke. Is it important that a young man has a dad or a teacher or a skiing?
I think it
Or a
has to
male
be.
role model.
I think it has to be a
An
role.
uncle.
It has to be something that he aspires to be.
Yeah.
If the individual doesn't aspire to be a blokey type, that's fine. But you
Right.
need to find a role model of some description. But for me, it had to be a man. It had to be a strong man. It had to be a man that said, "Phil, you sort yourself out."
Afua, I've had the pleasure of meeting your family. I know family is very important to you.
It's very important to me, and I wouldn't disagree with any of what Phil said. I think it's incredibly important for children to have parents who are looking out for them, or other people in their community who are looking out for them. I think there is definitely a specific issue of boys having fathers or male role models. We sat here and talked about the number
Is
of
that colour
black
specific?
male teachers. Well, the thing is that young black men are growing up in a society where they're massively underrepresented. They look on the TV, they
And
look in
demonised,
Parliament, they
and
look in the judiciary.
demonised.
The images of black men that are popular, in fact, this week there was a campaign that showed 50 young black men in hoodies and then revealed what they all do. You know, that they're lawyers, they're bankers. Our perception of young black men is linked to a history where we've seen them as criminal and out of control.
But
and
51%
I
in
do
YLIs.
want to just, because we're talking, and I'm not denying that it's extremely important for young men to have fathers or other male figures they can look up to. There is a history behind that. And listening to Trevor, you know, talk, it reminded me of that a lot of the black families in this country were recruited here. Their fathers were recruited to come and work here after the war on their own. A lot of them came alone. Their families followed later. The British government has played a role in encouraging the breakup of black families in the patterns of migration. And that has set a precedent that is a factor in looking at why black families are less likely to be
Further to the
two-parent-headed.
point that you made, you've not just got to be able to look after them, you've also got to be able to relate to them. OK, it's not good enough.
What do you mean?
But, for instance, if you'd have put somebody I didn't think I could be like in front of me to motivate me. Like, for instance, if a young black guy needs someone to look up to as a role model, he might think, well, I'm never going to be like him because I'm never going to be accepted. But he looks at him, he is an inspiration to a young black man. Yes, I have achieved. Yes, I have been there and done something. So it's finding the right role model
Just to finish
as
what
well.
I was saying, you know, and I agree that families are very important, but I do want to challenge the premise of your argument. It's the one I'm very familiar with. Rod Liddell has been, for example, writing about how the reason young black men are involved in crime is because they don't have fathers at home. Tony Sewell, who's a black commentator, has been saying this for a long time. If you look at the real work that's been done on the criminal justice system, it is much more complicated than that. Black boys are more likely to be arrested, charged and imprisoned for the same offences as white boys committing the same offences. The criminal justice system is not neutral. It is heavily prejudiced. And this has been found over and over again, most recently by the Lamy report. And it's difficult to deny that there is bias in the system. So it's not that they're necessarily more criminal, they are being treated more harshly.
We must get Trevor.
We can toss this around endlessly. I mean, the government has a view. It's given us a statement. They say we are fundamentally reforming youth custody to make it safer and more focused on rehabilitation. And as the Chief Inspector recognises, there have been encouraging signs of improvement in safety, but we recognise there's still more to do, including tackling disproportionality in the justice system, and a dedicated team is addressing this issue head-on. It reads to me like blah, blah, blah. Let's not get into a sort of general description of the system. Let's think about what we could do. Now, my point is you could do a number of things. First of all, accept families are like they are. We could do more to support black women, I think specifically, who we know statistically are more likely to have 2 or 3 jobs. Now, we could do more specifically to help women in those households because they haven't got any time to look after their children. Secondly, the transmission belt from school to prison are the pupil referral units, which are a complete disaster area. But the third thing, which I think we could think about, instead of thinking about, oh, what can we tell families what to do, the one place where a boy could have more role models, and currently doesn't, is in schools. 9 out of 10 primary school teachers are women. I would today change the law to allow primary school head teachers to offer men a premium to teach in primary schools. In fact, we changed the 2010 Equality Act to allow head teachers to prefer a man where the candidates were equal. I'd go further now. I'd incentivise them to put men in primary schools.
June, you're desperate to get back in.
Yeah, and I would say in order for all of the stuff that Trevor has talked about to happen, I believe that the community needs to get organised. And
you said have a conversation.
Let me finish. So I'll give you an example. So remember last year there was uproar when the sociology textbook said that Jamaican families were more likely to be raised by a single parent household, headed up by a single parent. And basically there was absolute uproar. The community was furious, incensed, went nuts. In no time, that textbook was rightly corrected. I believe we need the same on this. There's something that's happened where we've almost accepted that this is okay. Because if you look at these same boys here, I've just come back from Ghana, these same boys would not be doing this in Ghana. We know these same boys are not doing this in Jamaica. This system has failed these boys, but I also think it's up to us to say, no way. And that means it has failed these boys.
We'll almost spark it off again.
Before Nick explodes,
I know.
let's we're going to come back to this point a bit later.